Polonia. When I grew up, that's all I ever knew.
There was Polish spoken on the streets, in the Broadway Market. The churches were very, very important.
Christmas and Easter are the two times of the year where one's Polishness really come through.
The teachers mostly were traditions. Now there's a good story.
My grandmother made the most wonderful pierogi, and I think her secret was that she rolled the dough twice.
The intersection of Broadway and Fillmore. You could stand on that corner and it was like being in Times Square. There were people everywhere.
And then, of course, there's Dingus Day. And putting it bluntly, that's when all hell breaks loose.
You come back to faith and family. That is really at the heart of what being Polish is all about.
They came to Buffalo from the old world, manned factories and steel mills, built churches, homes, and schools, weaving a rich, reverent, continuing culture. Polonia, Western New York's Polish-American legacy.
Major funding for this program has been provided by St. Stanislaus Bishop and Martyr Roman Catholic Church, the Mother Church of Polonia. Founded in 1873 in Buffalo, New York. Additional funding provided by the Western New York chapter of the Kosciuszko Foundation, dedicated to promoting and strengthening understanding and friendship between the peoples of Poland and the United States through educational, scientific, and cultural exchanges. This grant was made possible by bequest from Casimir M. Slosky and by the members of WNED. Thank you.
My maternal grandmother, Sophie, left Poland when she was just about 17, 18 years old. She looked back to wave to her mother, who of course was in tears, and she looked and all of a sudden she didn't see her. And then she realized that her mother had fainted. It was so hopeful, what would, she find in this country, and yet her heart still was partially back with her family. I think of the sacrifices that they made. I think of the love and traditions that they've carried on to their families that we still hold today. I'm just very proud.
Today, that same love and sense of tradition radiates from 1/3 of all Western New York families, proud of their rich history, strong faith, and beautiful heritage, proud to be Polish American.
What is unique about Buffalo, about the Polish community, not just in Buffalo, but throughout the United States, is that it created a well-defined community. So well-defined that sociologists have given it a name, Polonia.
I don't think that there is an industry in Buffalo where Poles have not played a very prominent role. They have helped build this community, I see, with their brain or with their brawn, because I think both were needed. But that's the story of America.
As the 19th century drew to a close, Poland had been divided between three superpowers who suppressed language, education, customs, and traditions. Driven by religious and political oppression and by poverty and famine, many fled their beloved homeland to begin their own American stories.
So when we're talking about these immigrants coming from Poland, they're coming with their whole background of history of having suffered and fought for every single freedom and their expression of culture, their expression of religion, the maintenance of their own family structure, and indeed their very existence.
The economy of Buffalo was growing, and so there was both a push away from Europe, but a pull into the United States, and specifically into the great industrial heartland of America, so that the jobs were available here in the growing industries. Buffalo was a boom town at the turn of the century.
They said it was for bread, za chlebem in Polish, because they were looking for a better life for them and their families. They came to the United States with the idea of making a lot of money and going back to Poland and living in Poland again. Most of them did not have the intention of staying here permanently.
Here they found not only bread, but freedom and opportunity. Here they forged a new life, planting the seeds of their heritage. Here, Polonia sprouted. Most of the first Polish immigrants reaching Buffalo continued further west, where distinct Polish neighborhoods had formed in cities like Chicago and Detroit. In 1873, that changed. Polonia took root in Buffalo with the formation of St. Stanislaus Church, the first Polish parish in the eastern United States.
The bishop at the time went to Rome, and he met a seminarian, Father John Pitas, and persuaded the seminarian to come to Buffalo and to perform his ministry here. He was ordained in early June of 1873. Immediately the next day, came to Buffalo and founded St. Stanislaus Parish. That young clergyman became the dean of the Polish clergy until his death in the early part of the 20th century.
This 29-year-old priest became patriarch for the initial 82 families and the thousands that would follow them. A combination church, rectory, and school was built in an undeveloped part of the city. Here they gathered to worship, speaking their native tongue, adjusting to life in their new home.
I think a key factor early on was not just the founding of St. Stanislaus Church in 1873, but the founding of St. Stanislaus School in 1874, opening its doors in April of that year. That founding really marked the decision that people would be staying here.
One of the first things they did, which was very important, was to become landowners, and they're able to own their own homes and their own property, even though they didn't make a lot of money. They recreated the European milieu is what they really did. And I think even if you look at the writings of Lewis Mumford, he said that when the medieval paradigm was dying out in Europe, the medieval village was being recreated in America by these immigrant groups. And that's exactly what seems to have happened.
Ojczyzna to język rodzinny, mowa ojców, szczery od dzieci, piosenki weselne i pieśni święte, kolędy miłe i gorzkie żale.
Within 3 months of the completion of the church, 400 simple houses were built in the surrounding area. 2, 3, and even 4 families often shared a single home, saving money to pay for the passage of loved ones to America.
In many instances, the priest was the one who spoke not only Latin for religious purposes and Polish to his congregants, but he may have spoken English, and so they looked to him not only for spiritual leadership, but as someone who could assist them in their needs for jobs and life in this new country.
You know, Buffalo was a German city, and when you wanted a job, so most of the Poles took German names. My father took Myers. He was known as George Myers. Monsieur Pitas, the old Pitas, the Dean John Pitas, the men would assemble and Peckham and Fillmore, and he would lead them to work. And William, because there were a lot of slaughter factories, tanneries and all, because if you weren't German, you couldn't get a job.
Father Pitas could be seen escorting new arrivals from the train station to his emerging community. He traveled to remote areas of western New York, ministering to other developing Polish colonies, helping to establish St. Hyacinth in Dunkirk and Assumption in Black Rock. In 1886, the present 2-level St. Stanislaus Church opened. It had become one of the largest congregations in America, with 28,000 members.
But to look at what he did for the community, one has to look beyond the church. He was responsible for the formation of a newspaper that would serve the Polish-American community. He was responsible for the formation of the school. He was one of the founders of the Polish Union of America, a fraternal benefit society organized in Buffalo in 1890. When you have a community that is developing, it's leadership like that that really helped to establish a strong base for the community and provided cohesion that probably would not have occurred without his leadership.
The community that developed in the shadows of St. Stan's grew beyond anyone's expectations. Handicapped by language barriers, they initially took jobs no one else would accept. Better jobs and pay opened up as the new steel and automotive industries boomed, and the railroads and meatpacking industries grew. Some ventured into small businesses, opening grocery stores, bakeries, butcheries, taverns, barbershops, and even a brewery. Others went into professions like law and medicine.
Actually, the vision of Father John Pitas, the founder of the parish, was that this would be the central church of all of those Polish immigrants.
The population grew just too enormously for that to be realistic. A significant event occurred in 1886 when a second parish, St. Adalbert's, was established. That evidenced a growth of the Polish community beyond the boundaries of what St. Stanislaus could accommodate. But it also created an enormous sense of tension among the people.
Churches tended to reflect the regional differences of what part of Poland they were from. Some were from, again, the western part, and the northern part, the southern part. One of the great crises in the Polish Catholic Church on the east side was around the turn of the century when a Polish national Catholic Church broke away from the Roman Catholic Church.
In addition to regional differences, Poles yearned for representation in church hierarchy and for parishioners to control church property.
And it was that tension that ultimately led in 1895 to the formation of a competing church, Holy Mother of the Rosary Church, which eventually became Holy Mother of the Rosary Cathedral of the Polish National Catholic Church.
The growth of Western New York's Polonia can be roughly marked by the construction of churches. 33 Polish parishes were established between 1886 and 1922.
Within a 1 square mile area on the east side, one would have St. Stan's, Corpus Christi, Transfiguration, St. Adalbert's, St. Luke's, St. John Canty. When you go to the Black Rock area, Assumption Church is an enormous church, but not too far away was St. Florian's. You move to Lackawanna, there were a series of Polish parishes there, St. Barbara's, St. Hyacinth, St. Michael's.
Every parish became kind of a social center, a religious center, an educational center, a cultural center, so that the parish actually became the very focus of the entire neighborhood.
The neighborhoods themselves were defined by the local parish. The community surrounding St. Stanislaus was known as Stanisławowo. Fraternal, athletic, and recreational activities were all sponsored by parishes. They had grand dance halls, meeting rooms, and even bowling alleys.
In Niagara Falls, the area around Holy Trinity Church, which was the so-called Mother Church of Polonia, Niagara Falls, people would call it na Polsce, to Poland, going to Poland. If they would live like 4 or 5 blocks away, they'd say, well, we'll go to Poland and do our shopping.
Everybody was Polish, from the Bartnecki family to the Maciejewski family to the Pawlowskis. You could go up and down the street and it would sound like a Polish phone book.
Yeah, oh, of course. Everybody was Polish. And no, if you weren't Polish, something was wrong with you.
If you were a kid playing on the street, you always heard, we'd call them ciotkos. Everybody was an aunt, and they'd be on the porch crocheting, and they'd hear them gossiping and tell their little stories in Polish.
The whole strip along Hurdle Avenue was composed of small little grocery stores, and there was the Polish bakery and the Polish hardware store.
Whatever you needed, all within walking distance. Delis, grocery stores, butcher shops, restaurants, and of course, the bars, where the men would stop to maybe cash their checks on Thursday or Friday after work so that their family could eat for the rest of the week, but they had to have that shot and beer before they came home.
There was very little exchange of money in there. Each person had a notebook, and you go in and the grocer would note how much you bought this day.
I would go, my sister would go, we'd be 10, 11 years old, and I need a pound of bacon and a quart of milk and, half a dozen eggs. Okay, just put that on the tab. I wonder if she ever did pay it. I don't know.
Polonia became for the people an opportunity to develop themselves culturally and intellectually. Many of the people in Europe, particularly those who came from Prussia and those who came from Russia, were denied the opportunity for cultural enrichment.
There were all sorts of clubs and institutions. I think in the early days, people belonged to church-based and not necessarily religious organizations, but they were founded and maybe had meetings in a parish. That's why I say church-based. Many of them were patriotic things that talked about what we have to do is to ensure Poland's freedom when Poland regained its independence after 1920, after World War I.
There were such things as fraternal benefit insurance groups. The Polish Union of America, which is headquartered in West Seneca, New York, was founded in Buffalo in the late 1800s. This was done to protect the Polish immigrants from disaster. They didn't know too much about insurance and things like that, especially when they began to own their own property. So that's how that came into existence. Then the political scene came into being. Many political organizations grew in the Polish American community to promote their political agendas as well as their candidates for political office. The Polish American Congress, which is an umbrella organization that represents all of Polonia, was founded in Buffalo in 1944 as a result of the Second World War. They were trying to figure out how they could prevent Poland from being occupied by the Soviet Union at the time and to preserve their sovereignty.
You had singing societies, you had fraternal organizations, you had theater groups, dance groups, virtually any type of cultural activity that one would imagine would be available.
On streets with names like Stanislaus and Kościuszko, each Western New York Polish neighborhood created its own institutions, like the Polish Cadets of Black Rock and the Dom Polski of Broadway Fillmore. They became a true Polish home. Here, Polish songs, rhythmic folk dances, rousing music, and stirring dramas were performed. Gems of Polish literature were read and reread, and the neighborhood assembled for celebrations.
Well, I got married in the downstairs hall. I attended a lot of the classes here. I think my first visit here was when I was very young, and there was Polish dancing classes here. We were learning how to dance the Krakowiak. I remember a couple of dance steps: heel, toe, step, step, heel, toe, step, step, turn around, heel, toe, step, step.
So I taught folk dancing there for about 16 years. For the Polish Women's Alliance of America, and the Polish Library was located there, and that's where my mother went regularly to get her stash of books for the month, and I accompanied her, and that's where my first introduction to reading serious Polish literature.
There was a time when dance halls were filled to capacity in the Buffalo area, when bands played polka dances on weekends. You had St. John Canny's Lyceum, which was one of the most beautiful ballrooms I have ever seen in my entire life, where all the big bands used to come. I mean, Lawrence Welk used to play there.
Broadway Fillmore was the second busiest business strip after downtown in all of Western New York, and one of the largest in the nation.
I would just kill to go back on Broadway and Fillmore in 1957 and just look around.
Just that intersection, at times you could stand on that corner and it was like being in Times Square. There were people everywhere.
Near the center of Polonia Crossroads sits the Broadway Market. Beginning in 1888, the community congregated at this old-world public market daily, picking out ingredients for the evening meal while sharing the latest news and gossip.
People from all over the city would come to the Broadway Market and Broadway Fillmore area to shop, and you could see people standing by drones waiting for the streetcars, to go in.
Every morning they were there with fresh vegetables, live animals. You pick out a chicken and they kill it and clean it up for you while you're picking out your vegetables, and you're good to go.
When Grandma went shopping, I went to carry the packages, and sometimes that included a live duck.
They used to have sawdust on the floors to make it easier for cleanup, I guess. I thought it was kind of cool because you could slide along on it a little bit, and that's what I would do. And my grandfather would always yell at me to come back, and I'd be sliding along through the sawdust.
A butcher yelling out the next number, or the smell of the fresh kielbasa, and always the fresh breads.
Just any Saturday morning, there'd be hundreds and hundreds of people packed, 4 and 5 people deep at the counters buying meats at the Polish stands. And you knew the vendors by name, and they knew you.
It was a wonderful place to go to because it was just like a Baghdad. It was just filled with all kinds of delectable things, and a great treat for a child to go with their parents on the weekend to help bring the foodstuffs back home.
I would go shopping with my mother, and we would take a wooden wagon.
We'd have a sort of a coaster wagon. Everybody go in. We'd line up on Lombard Street or Gibson Street.
The whole side of Kobekers was loaded with wagons. She would bring me some food or something while I waited while she does shopping at Settlers and the Broadway Market.
John G. Sattler's Broadway Market shoe house began in the living room of the family home in 1889 and grew to become one of New York's largest department stores.
The big store, which everybody always talks about, is 998 Broadway Sattlers.
Say those builders work like beavers there at 998 Broadway.
Yes, that big new home for Sattlers is growing every day.
They called it a one-stop store. You'd go in there and you could get anything you wanted. Downstairs, they had in the basement, they had the meats and the bulk, dill pickles in those big barrels, sauerkraut in the big barrels.
Even my daughter used to laugh. You could go and buy your ice cream there, and you could go and buy your brassieres there. She always laughs about that, because they had everything.
Sometimes you see sitcoms or movies where there's a sale and women just kind of go in and go crazy and are fighting each other for their last pair of shoes. It was like that at Sattlers. It really was like that. They'd have a bin of shoes or handbags, and you would see this mass of humanity just picking through things, and things are flying up in the air.
I bought suits there for $15, $18 that would cost at Kleinhans maybe $40, $50. See, at Christmas time, you inched yourself at Settlers, and that was the store to go. See,
got my first communion suit at a place called Spoka's men's store on Broadway. I think I was probably the last group of boys that wore knickers to receive his first communion, because after that I remember, gee, the boys were wearing long pants. How come I had to wear these knickers?
I remember I liked Spoka because the salesman would always give you either a pocket knife or a belt. Who wanted a belt? All a belt could do is hold your trousers up. But a pocket knife, that was something to have.
Polish Americans kept an eye on their homeland as well as their community here in America, passionately guarding their language through a network of newspapers and eventually radio and television. Buffalo's Polish press included more than 40 newspapers and periodicals.
The one that had the longest presence was the Polish Everybody's Daily, which was had both primarily in Polish, but also had some text in English. That was published into the late 1950s. Beginning in 1960, the Ample Eagle, which is predominantly an English language newspaper, although it does have some text in Polish, was printed, and it's still published today.
Polish language serials, variety shows, and even Sunday Mass were standards on local radio.
With the familiar strains of the Rosary, we greet you again as we present to Father Justin's Rosary Hour program.
Witam was zacni rodacy, miłe rodaczki, słowami niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus. Na wieki wieków amen.
Still broadcast today, it is the longest-running religious program in the United States. Emphasizing faith, hard work, and sacrifice, Father Justin reminded Poles of their heritage as a soldier on duty from his radio post.
Here was a man of great vision, establishing a radio ministry, and now creating this tremendous network, such as he did with the Rosary Hour, which basically then, on the radio, was able to reach thousands and thousands of these immigrants in Western New York and Canada and beyond.
There were some people who could say that they'd walk down the streets of the east side of Buffalo, Polish-American community, and no matter where they were, they could hear the radios blasting from each home, and they could listen to the whole program as they went down the street.
I remember very vividly my great-grandfather, who on Sunday would sit in his shirt and tie and his vest all day long because it was Sunday. When those bells were heard over the radio speaker, would get down on his knees as a symbol of respect that he was receiving the so-called Eucharistic blessing through the radio speaker. Yeah, it was quite a thing. That 1 hour on Sunday from 5 to 6 was just as sacred as going to church.
The Shadow used to be on the radio, and I didn't want to listen to Father Justin droning about some religious subject that I figured we'd learn that in church or in school. And I don't necessarily want to hear that on a Sunday afternoon when the Shadow is on. So I'd sneak to my father's car in the garage. And as I told you, he was a physician, and he was in general practice, and he delivered children at home. And I think he had a confinement case, and he went to his car, and the battery was dead. I had listened to the Shadow and forgot to turn off the radio. That was the end of the Shadow.
Yes, for the next 3 hours, it's good fun, good fellowship on the Polka Party. You'll hear the top polkas, obetics, your favorite polka bands on the Polka Party. And here now is the man that's familiar to every Polish-American family, MC of WWOL's Sunday Polish-American program, Stan Staś Jashiński.
Stan came to Western New York from Detroit in the 1940s and had beautiful Polish diction, had a Warsaw accent, and immediately became one of the most popular personalities in Western New York. His Polka Beehive program or the Polish American show would be heard all over the eastern seaboard, 13 states, Canada. So he became a real positive for Western New York, became a personality that was recognized even outside of Buffalo's Polonia. The jingles heard on Polish-American radio programs were almost identifiable as the music that they played.
Lucky Urban, wybór ma, skład da.
Lucky Urban, name brand store, prices are amazing, something, something, something.
Kuta mało wiele, TV czy fotele.
I bet if you went up to most Polish Americans, they could probably hum a few bars or sing the lyrics.
What's cooking? Wardinsky, of course.
Don't give me that bologna, I want Wardinsky's. That was a big one. I remember that one.
Historically on Buffalo television, there were some very popular polka shows. Pick a Polka with Frank Wodorowski and Joe Michelog ran in the 60s.
That lasted, I believe, 4.5 years on WGR every Sunday afternoon from 4 to 5. And obviously, NFL football was not popular in those days. Otherwise, there was no way Pick a Polka could have been on Sunday afternoons, believe me. But it was an extremely popular show. It clicked beyond belief, not just with the Polish-American community, but it went above and beyond that.
On Channel 7, there was the New Yorkers with their polka show, and these had a lot of success. Even the popular show Dialing for Dollars, Johnny Banaszek, who would play the accordion, he was part of the Jimmy and Johnny duo, would always throw in a couple polkas every Dialing for Dollars show. Hence, Dialing for Dollars was very popular with Polish Americans.
When the first immigrant Poles set roots in Western New York, they did not dream of great things, but many would see great things accomplished by their children and grandchildren. Their old world values of thrift, hard work, and family solidarity helped pave the way for a more secure future. With each tick of the time clock, the past receded, the accents softened, the English improved, and to one degree or another, the mass of immigrants put on America and shed the old world.
There's an old saying, and to some people it might be offensive, that to be Polish is to be Catholic. And so ever since 966, when Poland was baptized with Prince Mieszko I, you know, it seems like the faith, the Catholic faith, has been married to the Polish identity. It's what we've come from, and it's our whole tradition, our culture. Everything surrounds our Catholic faith. You know, it's inseparable.
Niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus, teraz, zawsze i na wieki wieków. Amen. That was the beginning of a class everywhere. That if a priest would come into your house, you would say, peace, pokój temu domowi, peace be in this house, and niech będzie, blessed be Christ Jesus, now and forevermore. Oh yeah, that's the blessing.
A common Polish greeting. The words are simple, yet they say so much about the Polish people and their connection to their faith. That connection came full circle through the parish schools, taught by the Felician Sisters and the Franciscan Sisters of St. Joseph.
The kind of life they presented for young people educationally was extremely rich, and you came out bilingual.
I still remember my first lessons. There's a little book, and it said A-E-I-O-U, where the vowels was A-E-I-O-U. And E wasn't the letter E, was an I. You pronounce it E. E is for Igua. And I still remember it after 1959 till now.
My childhood best friend and I were just talking about that last night, about our memories of that time and how we could remember the rustle of the nuns' habits as they walked by our desk, and the sound of the rosary beads that they used to wear around their waist, the beads, you know, gently swaying with their habits.
They had a black habit and then white around the yoke was white, and it was the white stiffening around the head. You couldn't see nothing. They were in the yoke, the white was really stiff.
Oftentimes the classes were very large. It was not unusual for classes to be 50, 60, 70 students, often with so many students that it was two to a bench.
To this day, I will be thankful for the nuns teaching me language, and my mother will say to me, it was because of the nuns that you grew up knowing how to write well.
I remember we would have school plays. We would enact various Polish, not American, but Polish events. It wasn't that we were different from others. We were attending classes in a school where we learned everything, plus our Polish background.
The rigor of the classroom, I definitely remember that. I mean, kids were there to learn.
They were no-nonsense nuns.
Oh, they are strict on handwriting. We had a special tablet where we had to write just so, your ABCs and everything.
Serious, but loving and caring. There was always this softer side of the Felician nuns that you could sort of get through, you know, after there was just that little bit of fear and respect mixed in.
The children always participated in all kinds of processions, whether it was for May or Easter or Christmas. The kids were always there. We even had, when I was growing up, a special mass for kids on Sunday. And the sisters sat with their grades and took attendance.
To this day, whenever I smell spring flowers, it reminds me so much of that Easter procession, because we would walk in for the early morning mass, and every kid had a flower that he would carry in the procession that would go throughout the church, and the place was loaded with lilies and hyacinths.
Holy Communion was a great day for everybody in the parish when the new children were introduced to their first experience of receiving the host. And they were beautifully dressed, and the little girls in white dresses and the little boys in their little dark suits and their little armbands on, and escorted by what we called angels. Younger children who, from the kindergarten classes would precede the communicants and would put roses in front of them as they walk in preparation for the celebration in church. Corpus Christi was a great tradition held on outside altars, and there was a great procession starting from the church led by the priest who carried the host, and all of the boys and girls would be dressed in their special occasion clothes and would be following the priest and singing prescribed hymns for the celebration.
Our house on Sweet Avenue was one of the altars where the procession would stop, and the priest would come to the altar and then proceed to the other three altars.
The connection was people. People who shared the same story, and people who were very interested in the fact that their children receive an education, but in addition to knowledge, that they would receive meaning, and we celebrate meaning by doing things, both as a family and a community.
Corpus Christi was recently saved, and I was amazed and thrilled that they had 1,000 people this June for their procession. So obviously a lot of people who don't live in the old neighborhood anymore still want to come back and celebrate their ethnicity through the church.
I know many have felt for all these years that we have been faithful to the church, that we have been here for close to 150 years. And with the exception of Bishop Grosz and Bishop Jana, who were auxiliary bishops, we never had the chief bishop, the ordinary of the Diocese of Polish descent.
Theodore Roosevelt wrote correspondence to his special emissary to the Vatican, asking that they put in a word for Father Pitas to be made bishop. It never occurred, but that was a dream that it had occurred as long as 1904, only to find a final fruition in 2004 with the selection of our current bishop.
Today, I come to a new home, the Diocesan Church of Buffalo, and I greet you in the form and language of that salutation, Niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus. I kind of thought some of you might be able to answer that.
Our bishops were mostly Irish, and now when we get a Polish bishop, it's such a thrill. It's such a big thing to us, I think.
We're so happy to have you here.
We're delighted to be here, This is our gang here.
Make us proud.
I'm so excited I couldn't even talk. Shaking. Polonia is proud that we have, Polish bishop.
Bishop Edward, we are overjoyed. We are delighted at your presence here today for the Mother Church of Polonia. We are so delighted that our Holy Father has given us this beautiful gift, the gift of yourself, to be the 13th Bishop of the Diocese.
I look at all that seems to be here, it just fills me with all kinds of memories of my growing up in Trenton and the wonderful place of faith that church was for us, for growth and nourishment, and to share with each other this wonderful gift of faith that is so very much a part of the whole culture of the Polish people.
We know that they pronounce your name as Bishop Kimmer, but to the hundreds of people who have gathered here in this church, you will always be known to us as Bishop Kniaz.
October 16th, 1978. Church bells rang throughout Polonia. The inconceivable had happened. Cardinal Karol Wojtyła of Poland, became Pope John Paul II, the first non-Italian pope in 456 years.
Oh, that was tremendous. That was, it was something which probably happened once in a lifetime. Of such jubilation, people cried on the street from happiness, you know. After all, you know, and especially him, Wojtyla, who was here in '69, and he was in America several times. So he's probably one of the few popes in the history of the church that knew American church better than anybody, any pope, see? And he was here. And that was, I think that was the greatest event that ever happened as far as the Poles are concerned, in Poland and here in the United States.
Among the Polish community, it was, you gotta be kidding. I mean, this is incredible. That's not true. You're making this up. Until finally, it took a while to soak in, where people finally realized that this man selected by this College of Cardinals was the person to lead the church in the century.
To hear that it was Polish, from a communist country, a government that vows atheism and gave the church a tough time. I mean, you talk about an oxymoron. That was it. But again, those of us of Polish heritage of faith felt that, again, this was the work of Providence. It was maybe repayment for the faithfulness of the Polish people.
The more we learned about him, the more we marveled. He's such a deep and serious and aesthetic man that he's so impressive, and he became, of course, one of the great powers and strengths of this century. So you can imagine how proud we are of him and how we love him.
We're so proud of him when elected, and all the more proud of him throughout his life. How wonderfully he guided the church, and how he led us with such a man of deep faith and conviction, and really touched the world all around us. You know, so it is a little bit of Polish pride that we have, to tell you the honest truth, and we celebrated that tonight as we have during these past days. We lament his passing, but we also feel that he's left a wonderful legacy.
He stood up in the midst of the community of the whole world as a prophet, as a teacher, as a friend, as a brother, as a saint.
This has been a very sad week, not only for Roman Catholics, but for all of us. You claimed him as your Holy Father, and so did the rest of the world, including us. We are grateful to Pope John Paul II because it was in his pontificate that he called for a dialogue between the Polish National Catholic Church and the Roman Catholic Church. This isn't goodbye. We don't have that word in the Polish language, goodbye. Bishop Rose said, do widzenia, do zobaczenia, till we see you again in the kingdom of heaven.
So this evening we say, thank you, Ojciec Święty, Holy Father. Thank you, beloved Papa, Pope John Paul II, for all that you have done for us, God's family. You have fought the good fight. You have run the race, and now merited a crown that is placed upon you.
We feel very strongly in the Polish American Congress that this day, May 18th, as you can see on your program, says Son of Poland, God's gift to the world, the day that he was born. We feel that no greater Pole has ever lived on the planet Earth. And we also feel very strongly that those of us that has Polish blood in our veins, this in a sense is our holy day of obligation from this day forward, never to forget the greatness of this wonderful person, Karol Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II.
To z papieżem się nie zetknęłam, ale myślę, że poprzez właśnie wpływ Ducha Świętego i przez ten jego soul i power, nie wiem co miał, tak na mnie wpłynęło, że śmierć papieża była dla mnie bardzo wielkim osobistym przeżyciem. No i w pamięć o nim będę pielęgnowała przez czas mojego życia i przez czas życia moich dzieci, no i wnuków, jeżeli doczekam.
One of the most sacred traditions for Poles worldwide takes place not in the church, but in the home. The Vigilia Celebration begins with the sighting of the first star. No other day can surpass Christmas Eve in a Polish home. It is a true living heirloom.
It's traditional for us to make pierogi, which are these stuffed dumplings. I like to have it all fresh, so it's just within a couple of days of Christmas Eve that I make all of these dumplings. My nieces and nephews come in to help me roll out the dough and stuff it. The sealing is important so they don't fall apart when I boil them.
I still come so she can just cook me lunch.
Yeah. It's quite labor intensive, but the finished product is absolutely wonderful, and there's nothing better than a homemade one. You can't compare to anything that you buy commercially. Secret is thin, nice, flexible dough. Ask Martha Stewart. See how nice they look? You'd think I knew what I was doing.
The meal itself has to gather from the four corners of the earth. So it gathers from the field, it gathers from the streams, it gathers from the garden and the forest. And so you take your best. We used to go fishing every year for pike or muskie. And my father would always take the best fish, freeze that one, and we save that for Vigilia, for Christmas Eve.
Tonight we have these precious things. They're called uszka, or ears, and they're filled with mushrooms. And it looks like a little ear. See it? And I made these very laboriously with my nephew, and they are floated in the soup, which is the piece de resistance of the dinner.
The table is prepared with a thin layer of hay and a white linen cloth. An extra place is set for a passing stranger, departed family member, or the Christ child.
The only tablecloth for holidays is white, and we believe that because that's Mary's veil. Joseph made the table, he's the carpenter. We place the hay over the table and Mary's veil, and all of a sudden the table turns into the manger. It's a living manger.
If anybody would ask me what makes Polish traditions unique, I would say the sharing of the opłatek. It's a wafer, very much like a communion host, but it's not blessed, but it is eaten and shared at the Christmas Eve meal.
The magic of the opłatek thing is that you forgive each other. You sit there and you're actually breaking bread. There's this overwhelming sense of, yep, this is us, and this was us, whether we're standing here in 2004 or 2005 or 1675. And that is just a great feeling to be connected to all these generations. And that all comes to a head at that point where you pass that wafer around.
It's sort of mystic in a way, but it goes to such lengths that family members who are in different parts of the country or even different parts of the world will exchange it in letters or cards.
There's a saying, from one of the Polish novels that won a Nobel Prize as well at Amon's Peasants, the Peasants, where if you want to say, the religious ed teacher in town is explaining to the kids what Christmas Eve is about. And he says, every little blade of grass shivers when the first star comes out. Every little blade of grass feels that salvation is present on this earth, that God is here, God is with us.
Bóg się rodzi, God is born, proclaim the words of our majestic Polish Christmas carol, Jesus, Son of God, is born of Mary, for this night the Word was made flesh, and dwelt amongst us.
Throughout the ages on this eve, as the first star appeared, our ancestors throughout the world
celebrated with joy the Vigil Supper, or Vigilia.
As we do today.
W tę noc Słowo ciałem się stało I mieszkało między nami.
Our forefathers celebrated this evening with the breaking of the bread, the opłatek.
Poprzez łaski Boże możemy kontynuować I dzielić się tym świętym zwyczajem.
As we share this meal and break this bread, Jesus is born for us this evening.
Around this table, under our roof, and in our hearts.
You knew that at this particular time, in this particular place, everybody was doing the same thing. I'll never forget when I got into high school, a classmate of mine who was not of Polish background called me on Christmas Eve and like in the afternoon and says, "We want to go out tonight?" And I said, "Joe," I said, "don't call me 2 times in the year, on Christmas Eve and on Holy Saturday, because we're not doing anything else except what we do every year." It is a full celebration, but it's incomplete until we all gather together at the manger in the parish church. That's a family of families who get together supporting each other both in their heritage and their prayer and their celebration. They've all come back from Vigilia. They all have left their Christmas Eve table and come to church.
As spring begins to arrive in western New York, the sights and sounds of the Broadway Market explode as thousands of families converge in a rush to gather items for Święconka baskets and the Easter feast.
I found that people make pilgrimages now to the Broadway Market. Generations of people. Grandma's usually there with daughter or son, or daughter or son-in-law, and then the kids.
I know, everything looks good.
And Grandma shows them where all the Easter eggs are, the pisanka. Pick one out for yourself.
I equate it to like the swallows coming back to Capistrano. There is a momentum that builds. It starts with a week before Holy Week, then every day it just picks up the crescendo until Good Friday and Holy Saturday, when the place is traditionally just mobbed. We make these. It's a traditional way of making the eggs. There's 4 generations involved in them. My mom, who's in her 80s, all the way on down to my granddaughter. My dad, who's 92, takes care of the finishing. A lot of people remember doing these eggs with their moms, with their aunts, and it's just amazing to see the glow in their face as they remember members of their family and sitting down together and having quality time.
My father would take us down, pack up the car. We'd get there right when they were bringing in the fresh kielbasa and the fresh breads, and we'd buy everything quickly. But then we'd stay for a couple hours in the market, just walking around to sort of soak up the atmosphere.
We have to get ready for the Saturday's Święconka, so we have the right amount of bread, the butter lambs. We have to have the pierogis, and have the fresh Polish sausage, the margarine.
Good morning. Sausage can be fresher.
So I had to sit down yesterday to make my list so I don't forget anything.
The shopping list includes a selection of fresh and smoked holiday sausage, crossbread, placek, kruszczyki, Easter flowers, and the famous Broadway Market horseradish, ground fresh right before your eyes by the horseradish lady herself, Mrs. Scoop.
Would you like to try horseradish?
Of course, you don't want to forget your butter lamb. Malczewski's always had the most intricate.
My parents used to have a little mama-papa store, and my dad came from Poland, and he brought one wooden butter lamb, form. And when they passed away, I found that little form, and I started making it at the market. Then I had it automated, and I make it for all the chain stores now.
You can get them in many sizes. You can get the little tiny bananek or the bigger one, or the supersized. If you're really into your butter, the supersized bananek.
The smell of baked goods wafts through the air from a corner of the market where workers are busily preparing special Polish recipes.
The bakery's been around for several years. My parents really were the ones that made it as big as it is. It's really a big production. We sell for different supermarkets. And we have everything. Everything's really homemade. Placek, the cheese crumbs, and kruszyki definitely are number one. Definitely number one.
I heard about the Broadway Market even when I arrived here. We've driven by it several times. I said, sooner or later, I got to get over here. And this is a good time. Holy Week, pre-Easter. I used to work in a grocery store, one of the little Polish delis, so this was always a big time. And as it is here today, you know, that everybody's out buying all the food.
We came from Forest Hill, which is about 50 miles west of here. And I used to always buy my baked goods over there at the White Eagle Bakery. My butter lambs and all that stuff at Malcheski's. And their pierogis are tremendous. Did you ever try them? You should try them, they're good.
We've been doing this for more than 20 years as families. When my sister was single, she'd come with mom and dad. Now we're starting with our kids every year.
The Broadway Market is important for, you know, what it represents as much as the functionality of being a place to go and get your kielbasa and your pierogi. You can kind of see on people's faces that are there, you know, that it's really something special.
There is also a spiritual preparation for Easter.
Tonight we're visiting 7 churches, and it's really a Catholic tradition that goes beyond even the Polish people, because it's a tradition by which we honor the institution of the Eucharist.
Some of the traditions that I think are unique to Polonia would be on Holy Thursday and the visiting of the 7 churches. On the east side, you would go to St. Stanislaus and Corpus Christi and St. John Canty's, and you'd go visit and you'd see the adoration.
Many people remember this in the past, having done it with their families, but we want to maintain this tradition. It's a beautiful custom to visit churches, and so it makes it easier for our people to come together by bus.
Families return to church on Holy Saturday, where the Easter foods are blessed. A ritual that traveled to Western New York with Polish immigrants.
My grandparents' case, because the family was so large and they only lived three doors away from the church, the spread was put on a table on Holy Saturday, the day before Easter, and the priest would actually come to the house and bless the food that was on the tables.
The foods that we have fasted and abstained from for 40 days now become the foods of the celebration. Most importantly, again, is the Paschal Lamb, in this case made of straw from Poland, depicting with the victorious banner Christ's victory over suffering and death. This particular egg, as well as all the other written eggs in this basket, just returned from the Pope John Paul II Center in Washington on display. Looking at a particular egg, you could tell almost geographically the map of the country, because every village has its own design.
This becomes a time where families come together. 3 generations of a family coming and taking their basket. Sometimes kids have their little versions of their basket with chocolate and jelly beans. Remember, they might have given that up, candy, during Lent, and now they're taking it to be blessed at Easter time.
The church would fill with the smells of the sausages and the bread and the eggs. And I remember just being so hungry and not being able to touch that food because we couldn't touch it until we had the Święconka meal.
That's the way of hallelujah. Happy Easter.
Thank you. We're trying to keep our tradition alive, and we're here to celebrate Easter, where the step for Saturday is to bless our food, bless our baskets, as we did in Poland when I was still a little girl. And now we have 2 children of our own.
It's about savoring the sweetness of life and the bitterness, knowing that what's most important is your family and your faith, and to show them that, you know, in life more things matter.
It happens on Holy Saturday, where in the church is a display of Christ resting in the tomb. So people also go to church to pray there, to kind of join Christ, who is like a seed germinating towards the resurrection, towards new life.
And then, of course, there's Dingus Day, which is the day after Easter. And putting it bluntly, that's when all hell breaks loose.
Rooted in pre-Christian Slavic customs, the spring rite commemorates the baptism of Poland's first Christian prince. The ritual of sprinkling water and merriment was brought to America by immigrant families. Today in Western New York, Dingus Day is a time for celebration.
After you would give up your sweets and your beers and the polka dancing and the festivities, Easter Monday was this time to let loose in grand fashion.
Well, this is our 43rd annual sponsorship of the event here. And as you probably know, we initiated it so many years ago as a civic event. Before that, it had been sort of an in-family kind of a celebration.
When I was a little girl, my mother would come into our bedroom with a little bit of water, and she would douse us with this water. And in Polish, she'd say, "Dingus, dingus, po dingusie, dzieci baba w kapelusie."
Buffalo has really led the way to bringing back this tradition, and that's truly thanks to Ann and Ted Michael from the Chopin Singing Society. They really reinstituted this whole celebration. And you also had Mr. Dingus. There was Mr. Dingus, who was crowned, and then you had the Dingus girls. I'm yes, an ex-Dingus girl.
We started on our little club at 18 Kosciuszko Street, where we used to draw in the course of the day maybe 1,500 people. Now we're at this beautiful facility, the Hearthstone, and we expect today will be between 2,000 and 2,500 different guests throughout the day. And what's nice about it is that so many young people attend this event and become cognizant of their Polish traditions through this experience that we have.
Happy Dingus Day! The Polish people, the boys douse the girls with water. And then if they really like the girls, they buy expensive perfumes and douse them with perfume. And then they use the pussy willows. They usually hit them behind the legs. They usually fall in love. That's the story about Dingus Day that I can tell you.
If you play any kind of musical instrument on Dingus Day, no question you'll be hired to play, because everybody has a party going on with music.
The Polish law now that pertains to the Hearthstone Manor is no squirt guns. You have to do it the old way or no way at all.
As everyone is Irish on St. Paddy's Day, everyone's Polish on Dingus Day.
Buffalo is the Dingus capital. We have more Dingus festivities going on in one day. There's more polka dancing. There's more sausage being eaten than any other place that day.
It's just the best party of the year. I just wish it wasn't a Monday night, so we got to go to work on Tuesday morning. But we all have to make our sacrifices.
Much of Western New York's Polish population is now 4th, 5th, and even 6th generation Polish American. While some landmarks still anchor Buffalo's east side, the once insular community has dispersed. Western New York still harbors a proud community that holds its rich history and powerful heritage in a cherished place in the heart.
I think the heart of Polonia is in everyone who embraces the heritage, the culture, the history, the art, the language of Poland.
Even if it is that only once a year visit to the Broadway Market, or coming for some special service to the church, and they're reminded, your great-grandmother or your grandmother was here, and I was brought up here. I remember when I was a little girl and Grandma would bring me to the market.
That's what drew me so much to the culture in Poland, is just that simplicity, that stripping it all away and saying, okay, what's really important in life. And, again, you come back to faith and family. And that is really at the heart of, to me, what being Polish is all about.
The actual spirit is found in the people themselves, and the tradition that they hand on to others and the heritage that they hand on to others. That's the true spirit, and that's the true heart of Polonia.
One of the things characteristic for the Polish community is how we revere our language. If you speak the language, you're in immediately. No explanations necessary. Everybody knows you understand what we understand. That was historically conditioned because of the fact there were no boundaries in Poland for 120 years. So whoever spoke your language was your person. If you didn't, you weren't a member of the community.
A lot of people say it's a matter to learn the language so you can communicate, but as we tease ourselves in my generation, it was a matter of survival. You always wanted to know what Babcia and Jaja were talking about. And if they were speaking Polish, you just had to know. Because it was English, you knew it was nothing, no big secret, but it was secret if it was Polish.
Polish was the first language for many children growing up in Polonia. Words and grammar, first learned at Mama's knee, were stressed and reinforced in the parish schools.
And then came a time when the people didn't want their children to speak Polish. They realized that it could be a problem in, quote, assimilating into the American mainstream, and that it would be harmful for their advancement. So eventually the Polish language was sort of gleaned from the curriculums in the schools.
A small group of Polish immigrants arriving in Buffalo after World War II organized a school to teach their beloved language and culture. Today, students still gather at the school's current home, St. John Gualbert's in Cheektowaga, to embrace their ancestral heritage.
I'm very proud that my children come. They're second generation born here. My husband doesn't speak Polish. My side of the family speaks Polish, so my children do speak Polish in order to communicate with them and to communicate with their relatives who are all in Poland also.
We are recent emigration from Poland. We both, me and my wife, born in Poland. This is just a perfect school for us because they can learn both language and the culture and meet other people who speak Polish. And they don't only think that only mommy and daddy speak some strange language at home.
It's not only about knowing how to read and write, but also to know all the important events, all the important dates, all important people that live in Poland.
Even the muscles of your mouth are formed in a different way if you speak always English or always Polish. So this is the big effort to change, to push those muscles into the different position, and of course to memorize vocabulary, grammar.
We know it's a commitment because we have to come every Saturday here. It's a long drive.
We don't have lots of people around who speak Polish, so the kids basically has no contact with the language and culture. Here we're just making new friends, Polish friends, and it's just fun.
A lot of my friends are impressed. I teach my friends a lot of words, and sometimes they say they might want to go with me to Polish school one day. There's dancing, and I'm the assistant dance teacher, and we have singing classes, and we do a lot of plays and stuff.
We don't have to hide our tradition, we don't have to hide that we speak Polish.
Katein z polskiego dziecka. Kto ty jesteś?
Polak mały.
Jaki znak twój?
Orzeł biały.
I was living in areas of the country that did not have Polish communities. So for me, it's an expression that now I'm allowed to have. And that has been a wonderful discovery process as I study, as I learn, as I talk with my father. There is a greater depth of understanding about where I came from, about my grandparents, about perhaps what their experience was like as immigrants coming to this country. And it teaches me more about who I am.
Our school exists for 50 years, and we are hoping that those children that they are in kindergarten now, someday they will bring their children, or the older kids will bring grandchildren, because that's the whole purpose. passing information, passing our roots, our heritage from generation to generation.
Those Polish roots are firmly established in Western New York. The seeds planted more than a century ago still flourish as successive generations instill the tenements of Polish heritage in their children.
I'm American first because, of course, this is my homeland. I was born here. But I'm a Polish American because I have my heritage, too.
To Polish Americans of any generation, the Pulaski Parade is a time to display their pride in the contributions Poles have made to this country. The annual parade celebrating the great Revolutionary War hero Kazimierz Pulaski was first held on Broadway.
I watched the parade almost every year. And we would walk down, you know, from the house, you know, walk down because you couldn't park. All the streets were, you know, closed off. But the parade was beautiful.
The highlight was always seeing who the Grand Marshal was going to be, right at the beginning of the parade, and then watching to see all the different organizations and see if you knew anybody.
Dignitaries always thought it was important to come to Broadway Fillmore to celebrate this parade, which is one of the biggest in the nation, this Pulaski Day Parade. So hundreds of floats, and the streets would be lined with people, so that always was a celebration of Polish pride.
The biggest crowd ever when we had President Kennedy here was 500,000 people, and Niagara Square was like a sea. And we went to the Broadway Fillmore area, and there was just mobs.
When John F. Kennedy came to town, it was like an amazing thing, and everybody had to go, and everybody had to see, you know, the president was coming. I was probably about 3, and there I'm standing with the American flag in one hand and the picture of John F. Kennedy in the other. At such an early age, you're taught pride already, you know.
Today, the parade continues to draw thousands every summer. It now runs down Harlem Road in Cheektowaga.
Well, the parade is definitely now a staple of my summertime activities. I think that sense of unity that you feel seeing people dressed in their red and white with their Polish flags and great-grandparents with their great-grandchildren experiencing this together, really for that moment in time, that's all that matters is being Polish.
At the parade or at the festival, you'll even find people who are Polish pride who aren't even Polish.
I'm Polish all the way through, 100%.
I'm Polish American, and I am so proud of my heritage that I have spent the last 15 years gathering information and writing about Polish customs, traditions, everything having to do with those things in English to make it available to my community, to my Polish American family out there.
In Poland, on St. John's Eve, the first day of summer, they used to play some games with beautiful wreaths of flower like this. These old traditions are really something that families enjoyed, really brings people together, they're fun. And we always hope that when people try something here, they're going to try it again. So people will have ideas. Oh, the Polish way to do Christmas. Oh yeah, the Polish way to Easter. Well, the kids have a birthday in summer, so maybe we'll try some of that St. John's Eve stuff. Does anybody else want to try? Do you want to try this game?
Here I can be who I am with other people who are and share that same history, tradition, heritage, and way of life. You need a geographical point of reference that you come back to where you don't explain. You don't have to explain. You don't have to ask. You just celebrate. The parish has become that. Festivals in our Western New York area and other parts of the country do the same function, where everybody comes to the festival and everybody feels at home. There are certain people who are looking for the understandings of the meaning. That's why the presence of a grandparent or a senior member, who's the connection between the heritage and the present, is so extremely important.
It's just the little stories that you miss when you're a little boy or girl. It's important to know that, to get that information copied, get it down, get somebody to talk, get the oldest relative to talk about their family, because once it's gone, that information is gone. This could be very well your grandfather. Did he die in 1936?
Yes, he did.
Well, this is his death notice in the
Yes,
Jimmy.
and I never could find anything. Remember, I could never find anything on the family? Remember, I could never find anything? We found my grandfather's name when he died and everything.
Oh, my.
And it's, my grandparents died back in the 30s. And they have no history of it. And my father shortened our last name back in the 40s. But I never could find anything out. I walked up to the booth. Within 5 minutes, they found out when my grandfather died. I didn't know that. How many people are with this last name that live in Poland? I just want to know what happened if I have family members and, you know, who they are. And you know, it means a lot to my brothers, and they were always trying to figure something out.
It's like finding a piece to a puzzle that you have this big picture of your family, but you have the edges, but you're missing the innermost pieces. And once you connect, it's like finding a whole bunch of pieces. Same analogy, you take a piece, you've tried every single place to put that piece. All of a sudden, it fits. And that's what it feels like.
The Polish-American community gathers to connect with the past, explore their heritage, and sometimes just to celebrate.
Just fun, wholesome fun. Not too many things in this world that are left that are wholesome, and this is one thing that we can get together with food, ethnic foods, and music. Just a really good time.
I like dancing polka. I love dancing polka, and the food is good. Yeah, definitely the food.
What could possibly measure up to Babcia's cooking? How about a kitchen full of wonderful Polish cooks and their secret recipes?
It's a secret. Oh, we have pierogis, sauerkraut and cheese. 800 pierogis, 7 bins of sauerkraut.
Oh yeah, this is a beautiful one right here.
We have Pulaski, sauerkraut, and sausage. Wardzinski's Polish sausage. Go get some more sausage. This is good. You want one? Parsley potatoes, and then you get a nice serving of any kind of home pastry you want. We come for the food and the music. That's the best food in the world, right here.
A lot of beige food. It seems there's a lot of browns and beige in Polish cooking.
I was at Tops the other day, and I'm buying pitted prunes and vinegar and something else. And the lady goes, "You're making czarnina, aren't you?" And I said, "How did you know that?" She goes, "Oh man, I could taste the stuff." And we started talking about czarnina. This is a lady at Tops I never met in my life. And all of a sudden we got something in common.
I was raised by my mom and my sister, my grandmother, and my mother's 5 sisters. There are a lot of women in my life, and they were always cooking something. My grandmother had this big pastry board. I just remember a lot of flour flying in the air. There was always a cloud of flour around her, and she was covered.
One of my earliest memories of cooking with my grandmother is when she used to make czarnina, which is the duck blood soup. Being 4 or 5 years old, I had a new best friend in the backyard playing with this duck until I found out that it was going to be made for dinner the next day.
The only way you could cook like Grandma is if you measured with her hands. It was a little of this, a little of that, until it tasted right.
I remember them making the kielbasa at home or the horseradish at home, and you know, as a kid, they'd let you grind maybe the horseradish. You go outside, and they'd give you a little metal thing. They call it a tarka, and you would sit there and scrape the horseradish.
Dinner time was a time that everybody came around the table, shared stories, shared jokes, argued. It was probably the most pleasurable time of the day, where the entire world stopped, and we concentrated around family and the food.
Throughout history, Poles have shared their rich and vibrant musical heritage with the world.
I took piano lessons from the Felician sisters, and of course I played many pieces by Chopin, and they taught me all about the history of Polish music. And I also think of opera, and I think of Szymanowski and Moniuszko, and I think of people like that, and Paderewski.
A sort of history expressed in song, Polish folk music is dear to the heart of many.
My father and his best friend were both from the same village in Poland. And these two gentlemen, when they got together, they would eventually end up singing Polish folk songs. And everybody would gather around them and join in.
My Uncle Frank would always start crying whenever they'd start singing Góra luczy nie żał.
These songs were sung for generations, and here we are miles across the oceans and generations later and still singing them. But to me, the real music of Poland is the folk music.
Yet there is one style of music that seems forever associated with Polish Americans.
Those of us that were brought up here in the United States in Polonia communities after the turn of the 20th century developed the polka as sort of, I refer to it as the Polish American anthem. People came here from Poland with their folk music. They saw how easily the folk music fit into the rhythm of the polka.
The songs, the melodies brought over by our grandparents and forefathers, and just traditions that are passed on from generation to generation.
And ever since he's been 6 months old, I'm singing him Polish. My babcia taught me and my judge taught me, and I think it's very important that we teach our grandchildren.
The music is so infectious. You have to be careful because, you have to get your right little entry point there because everyone is just whirling and turning so quickly. Sometimes you'll see a little Polish lady, a little babcia, who's kind of moving slow, and all of a sudden maybe one of her favorite polka starts, and it's as if by a miracle she's 21 again, and she grabs her partner, come on Zosia, let's go, and gets up on that dance floor, and look out. Two Polish ladies doing the polka, it's dynamite. I think, the fountain of youth.
I learned polka at a very early age, and I learned from the best. I learned from my grandparents. I think it's just something that comes naturally. If you've ever danced the polka with somebody who's not Polish, it's very difficult to polka with them.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Polish Heritage Dancers, dedicated to promoting Polish heritage through song and dance.
The Heritage Dancers are one of Western New York's most visible symbols.
Kind of a family. I mean, whatever's Polish and whatever we can do together and teach each other, we do. We have a strong Polish community here, and I believe we should keep it alive, and I think we're losing a lot of it. Detroit, Chicago, Wisconsin all have large Polish folk dance groups, so I'm trying every year to get new members involved and carry on the traditions.
My favorite, I'd have to say Lubelski Suite. My family's from the Lublin area of Poland, which is the southeastern area of Poland, and the costumes are gorgeous and heavy, and warm also, but it's just so much fun, like the mock part, it's just so much spinning and so lively, and your hands are in the air and you're just flying through the air. It's just a lot of fun.
I'm just a mom from the group, but I've become one of the stage moms. I help fix hair for the girls, and I take care of the younger kids when they're not dancing. The youngest group is a preschool group, and because I'm a teacher, I've kind of fallen into the role of helping to teach them some of the dances.
Sometimes it's hard. It takes a while for them to get the steps, but I'm really proud of them. They just finished a new Gudowski, and they premiered at the Polish Heritage Festival, and they were wonderful. It was a hit. So I'm very proud of them.
Dingus Day is huge with the Poles, and so we go around to at least 7-8 parties over on the one day. So we're out from noon till like last year, I think 2 in the morning, dancing.
My daughter dances, and I want her to have some of her Polish heritage in her. And my dad and mom have always tried to share their Polish heritage with our family, and I want to pass that on to my daughter. And this is a way to keep it in our family and to pass it on to the next generation.
First and foremost, the greatest gift we ever received was to be born or to live in America. And the next greatest gift is to be Polish.
I'm a product of my Polish heritage. Whatever there is significant about me is intertwined with that heritage. It's my substance.
Polonia isn't so much a place. I like to think of it as now that we have a Polonia of the heart. It's a place in your soul.
Your family has been sharing the Opłatek for at least 1,000 years, right? It's a pretty heavy responsibility, or whatever you want to call it, for you to be the one that breaks that chain. And I think that's where you look at the customs and traditions as the chains that hold you together. And, maybe they're not going to have the St. Casimir's Day party, or May 3rd is not celebrated really in Buffalo anymore, whereas in Chicago it still is. So those things disappear, but what are the things that are keeping it alive? It is the fact that everybody runs to the Broadway Market with almost a blind devotion. If you keep that part of that tradition alive, that at least gives you a doorway, a portal into expanding and learning about your Polish roots.
Most of the people today do reflect on their heritage, on their origin, and respect it, and try to know whatever they can about the fate or the traditions and the culture of their forefathers. It's a tapestry. It's a tapestry. Whether you are American, but at the same time you're proud of your origin.
It really goes to your heart, where you remember all those things that your grandparents talked to you about. You remember those traditions. You remember the nuns talking about Copernicus and Madame Curie and Kosciuszko and those luminaries that really did something for the world in general, and you feel very, very proud.
If you really knew the richness and the depth of the Polish story, there's no way that you could not be proud to be Polish too.
Western New York's Polonia should be proud. Proud of the inspiring tapestry it continues to create. Starting with meager means, but rich in spirit and tradition. Determined, inspired by faith. Through hard work and sacrifice, a community came to be. Traditions are passed from generation to generation. Western New York is enriched by the Polish Americans.
And so where is the heart and the soul of Polonia? It's all over. But it has to be focused, and it has to be preserved, and it has to be communicated, and it has to be handed on, and it has to be appreciated. And that means we have to make the investment, which is a great sacrifice, as our forefathers and mothers made to sacrifice to give this building, that we sacrifice our time and talent and treasure to preserve what we've received, that in future generations they could look back and thank us for what we have preserved for them.
Major funding for this program has been provided by St. Stanislaus Bishop and Martyr Roman Catholic Church, the Mother Church of Polonia. Founded in 1873 in Buffalo, New York. Additional funding provided by the Western New York chapter of the Kosciuszko Foundation, dedicated to promoting and strengthening understanding and friendship between the peoples of Poland and the United States through educational, scientific, and cultural exchanges. This grant was made possible by bequest from Casimir M. Slosky and by the members of WNED. Thank you.